is the California Transportation Commission hearing for January 21 to 20 to 21. Let's first start with a roll call.
Commissioner Alvarado?
Yes.
Commissioner Semi?
Here.
Commissioner Burke?
Here.
Commissioner Hart?
Here.
Commissioner Gilmetti? Commissioner Gordillo? Commissioner Hinman?
Here.
Commissioner Kehoe? Commissioner Medaffer? Commissioner Cavaloni? Chair Dunn?
Present. Thank you. Quorum acknowledged. Couple of just quick housekeeping. Commissioners, on your side of your dais here, there's a button that's marked mic, M-I-C. It has request and speak. So all you have to do is hit speak and your mic is live. So do you see? There's yours, Jim, right here.
Oh, yes.
Okay. All right, so you got all that? Do you see where that is? And if you would educate your commissioner who is not here when they arrive. We're expecting...
wrong person.
we're expecting Commissioner Kehoe, Guardino to be here shortly. Okay. And Medaffer, correct. Jim Medaffer's on his way. All right, so first up, item on the agenda, election of commission chair and vice chair. It is that time again. Yes, Mr. Gilmetti.
I'd like to make a motion to nominate Commissioner Alvarado for chair this year.
We have a motion by Mr. Gilmetti, a second by Commissioner Burke to nominate Bob Alvarado as chair. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Any abstention? Very good. Congratulations, Bob. You are our chair. Next meeting. Awesome. Thank you. Very good. Yes. Fantastic. Thank you very much. And I'm looking now perhaps for a vice chair.
Any volunteers?
I'm sorry. I would like.
There you go.
I would like to make a motion to support Commissioner Assemi as vice chair.
Second.
We have a motion for Commissioner Assemi, second by Mr. Arp, second by Mrs. Inman. Any discussion? I have lots to discuss, but I'll hold it for later. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? Thank you and congratulations, Commissioner Assemi. Thank you. We are set for an excellent upcoming year of a lot of hard work. Thank you. Next up, approval of minutes for December 9 and 10.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Alvarado. Second by the chair. All those in favor? Any opposition? Any abstention? Motion carries. Okay, come on, guys. Stay with me. Next, commissioners' meetings for compensation.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Alvarado, a second by Commissioner Burke. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Abstentions? Thank you all. That matter has been approved. And next, our Executive Director's Report. Mr. Kempton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You covered some of the housekeeping points. I wanted to say the restrooms are out the back door and to the left, and if you need to exit the building in the event of any kind of an emergency, out the back door and exit to the right and out to the street. I know there is Wi-Fi here. I don't know what if somebody could slip me the code, then guest and no password, G-U-E-S-T and no password if you need to use your Wi-Fi. With that, wanted to introduce a staff member that we did not acknowledge at our last meeting. She's been with us now for about 2 months, and that is Jennifer Velasco, who just gave us the passcode, who is the new administrative assistant at the Commission, and she's here today to observe the meeting. always like to make sure that every staff member gets a chance to watch the commission in action. And Jennifer has a background as a teacher, a novelist, and an editor. We think that, and she's already, by the way, helped us with the annual report and some other things in terms of the editing function. She taught post-secondary English with a master's in English from San Jose State University. She's a great addition to our staff, and we wanted to welcome Jennifer.
Yay. Thank you, Jennifer. Welcome aboard.
She would have been a terrific addition had she taught elementary school.
Especially with us.
Yeah, particularly the recess portion. Yeah. Next, I wanted to talk about, commissioners, is how the annual report is being received. I've heard from many of our stakeholders, some of the folks out in the audience, and we've also heard from a number of organizations. And I know, Madam Chair, that you heard from Mobility 21 in Southern California. But we did have a letter here for your review from the California Association of Councils of Government. Bill Higgins is here in the back as the executive director, endorsing the Commission's legislative and administrative recommendations that were included in the annual report. So wanted to express appreciation to the Commission for, your input, literally the development of the concept that we proposed this year, and it is being well received. And just as I think our Prop 1B, Promises Made, Promises Kept report was received. So thank you for that. I wanted to give you a brief report on the TRB meeting, the Transportation Research Board meeting that was held in Washington, D.C. Over the second week of January. 5,000 transportation geeks, I guess is a good way to say it, descend on Washington, D.C. to talk about transportation and the research that's being done to support the program. Commissioner Medaffer was invited to participate in a subcommittee meeting on the road charge, and we also used the opportunity while we were there in Washington to visit a number of the key staff members of both the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee as well as the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, along with Chief Financial Officer from Caltrans, Norma Ortega. We got to talk to a lot of people, a lot of staff folks, as all the members of Congress were en route to the State of the Union address, but we were able to talk to a lot of people and had a lot of good dialogue and got a lot of good information. Met with David Kim at FHWA, learned a lot about not just the money that is available in the new federal act relative to support of road charge efforts around the country, but also the federal information. You'll hear more from Eric Thronson later on that. So with that, I have a personal announcement to make. It's been almost 1 year, and in fact, it's exactly 1 year to the day that I was hired by the Transportation Commission last year. And while I did say that I would stay a little bit longer, I think the time has come, and there's a variety of reasons that have governed that. I'm going to pause at this particular moment because I think the chair might want to recognize our newly appointed commissioner, former State Senator Chris Kehoe.
I was going to wait until the commissioner's reports, so
okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, fine. Yeah. So in that time, in that year, under the Commission's direction, we've done an awful lot. We've rebuilt the CTC staff. We've brought in 6 new people. We were really shorthanded, trying to do a horrendous workload. I'm so proud of our staff. We have just a great staff assembled. It's been a real sea change in terms of our capacity. We've enhanced the Commission's outreach to the administration, to the legislature, to the stakeholders, and to the public, which I think is very good. We've really maneuvered through some tough times, and there are more tough times ahead, and I'm sorry that I won't be in this position to help with those. We've documented the success of Proposition 1B. We've published a practical annual report that is easy to read, has an insert that people can look at, and in a matter of 4 or 5 minutes they can know what the Commission has been saying and what we've done over the past year. We've organized and assisted a technical advisory committee to explore the potential for a mileage-based user fee in California, working in conjunction with Caltrans and the State Transportation Agency, which has been just a fabulous exercise as far as I'm concerned in terms of public participation. I've told the story often about not thinking that we would be able to keep these people engaged, and they were absolutely amazing. No question that there's much more to do, but I wanted to announce today that Beverly and I have decided it is time for me to move on. So after nearly 43 years, I will be resigning effective the end of this end of March. So I hope to be able to stay on in a capacity to assist the new executive director and the commission over the next 3 months through the end of the fiscal year. That will be up to the Public Employees Retirement System to approve that approach. But I do want to thank the commission for the opportunity. This has just been a great amount of challenge and really fun for somebody like me. And I want to thank the great staff. They've just been superb. I've appreciated working with all of you, and I look forward to some new adventures.
I'd just like to say over the last 40-something years, the transportation community in the state of California has prospered when you came on the scene, all the way to the very bitter end, which we're not going to let him go too soon. But, like everybody else, we're going to continue to kind of pick up the phone and call you for advice and counsel. And I wish you and Beverly well. I made a promise to Bev that I wouldn't get in the way, and I know I won't keep my promise to him, but I'm going to keep my promise to her. But enjoy your well-deserved retirement, and I'm not going to miss you because you're not going away, but enjoy it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Arp.
I've known Will a long time. He's not dead, so I don't know why I'm talking like this. But I will tell you that there is no one in this state that knows transportation, that is as passionate about transportation, that has gone out and fought for transportation on every kind of occupation and job, some of them very high profile and very stressful, than he has. He is been the face of this arena for a very long time and will sorely be missed. He is not only all of those things, but a friend.
It's true.
Thank you.
Commissioner Guardino.
When I was an even younger punk, in my early 20s working for a state legislator, Will Kempton was the legislative director at Caltrans. And as he's done with so many of us, he took a personal and professional interest in a young punk and tried to mold and shape him both personally and professionally. For many years, I tried to keep up with him as a running partner through the hills in San Jose. And he has been a mentor for 3 decades now. And I can't think of a finer person who advances transportation for 39 million Californians than Will Kempton, and tries to touch the lives of everyone he meets in a positive way as well. Will, thank you for dedicating not just 41 years, but this past year to this commission. You've set the gold standard, and we deeply appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Gilmetti.
I don't think I can top anything that the three of you have already said. I just want to tell you, Will, I have your cell number. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Commissioner Inman.
All I say is, Will, we have an awful lot of freight work left, and I think you still like those packages delivered, so thank you. It's been just a blessing for all of us to know you and work side by side, and look forward to you having a great time, and we'll see what happens.
Commissioner Assemi.
It's been a pleasure to work with you and get to know you better over the last 12 months, Will.
Thank you.
Best of luck.
Thanks.
And enjoy the rest.
Commissioner Burke.
Well, it has really been a pleasure for me to work directly with you because I've seen you over the years, so many places and so many roles, and had an opportunity to indirectly work with you. But I just want to tell you how much I appreciate the fact that you were willing to come here and to assist us in moving forward at a very important and key time in the world of transportation. Everybody's always available when you've got money. But when you don't have any money, and when you have people who have great expectations and great needs, it's such a challenge. And you have been up to that challenge. I know you will continue. You're not going to be leaving transportation. I realize that. But we want to say thank you for coming
Thanks
here.
very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. And welcome, Commissioner Kehoe. I was going to give you a more formal introduction, but in the spirit right now, why don't you jump in on this item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Will, just thank you for all your years of service to the state of California in so many different roles. Every word that's been said is true, and I appreciate it. You are a true public servant. Thank you.
Thanks.
Chairman Frazier.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You're the reason I'm here. Oh. You and I have worked on some serious issues together that probably at this point has saved hundreds of lives. You were the inspiration for me to be here and to serve on this panel. You're going to be sorely missed by me and everybody else. And you mean the world to me.
Thank you.
Thank you. You saved my life, too.
Thank you very much. And if I may say, Will, on behalf of both Senator Bell and Commissioner Tavallone, who was unable to attend today, it is an amazing thing that you do where it doesn't matter whether you're working at Caltrans or at the regional level or as a consultant or an advisor, you are always the right man for the right job at the right time. And it could not be more true with your coming in, even for this short tenure of the California Transportation Commission, where we had a number of issues that really it required your expertise and breadth of knowledge. And so for that very short time, I will be forever grateful for you saying yes to a phone call that was made. And pardon?
The first call.
The first call. And I can't thank you enough. Again, this is not a wake, ladies and gentlemen, because we know that Beverly will get him, but he will always have great ideas and great solutions that he will share with us as we need to move this state forward. I don't think we will ever completely lose you from the system. So one more time, if you would all join with me in a round of applause for Will Kempton. It's very good.
Well earned.
Okay. And the drinks at the bar at the end of this meeting. We are going to have drinks. We're on item number 6 now, commission reports. Let me begin by first acknowledging more formally our brand new commissioner, Christine Kehoe of San Diego. Many of you have worked many years, a decade or more, with Commissioner Kehoe when she was in both the Assembly and the Senate in the California legislature, a highly distinguished career. Today, she serves as the executive director of the Plug-in Electric Vehicle Collaborative for California, and brings that innovation and new technology that your commission has worked on for a long time to elevate. She is an appointee of Speaker Tony Atkins, and would you join me in welcoming Commissioner Kehoe to the dais? Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate the kind words, and I want you and the commissioners to know that I'm honored to serve and look forward to the tasks before us, daunting as they are. And I do hope to concentrate on innovation and technology and sustainable transportation. So I think this is going to be a fun assignment for me. I appreciate being here.
Thank you very much. And I'd like the record as well to reflect we've had many, many years of wonderful service by Commissioner Kehoe's predecessor, Dario Fromer. He will be very missed in this group, but we also know that he is a wonderful resource to approach on the issues of the Commission and elevating the state profile in transportation. So we're sorry to lose him and delighted to welcome Commissioner Kehoe to this very collegial body. So welcome again. Commissioners, do you have any reports to share? Commissioner Inman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I attended TRB again this year, and I really want to encourage us to take advantage of the hot topic in D.C. is freight nowadays. So I think that we have been doing an awful lot of work in our regions and our state, but I think now that for the first time when we have actually dedicated freight funding on several different tranches, that we really need to make sure that we benefit from that. So I have felt challenged over the years with all of the work that goes on at TRB, and I don't think collectively we do a good job of transferring that out and communicating some of those lessons learned and how we can take advantage of that. So I would encourage all of us to really take a look at what transpired there and how we can really put that into some of our actions and build from that, because there's an awful lot of great ideas that get shared and presentations and everything, and then we all get back to our day jobs and kind of forget. So whether it's on the technology side or the sustainable freight, doesn't matter which topic, I think we really have to continue to coalesce and take advantage of that, because our nation or our state really does have the nation's gateways when it comes to international cargo. So I want to make sure that we keep the pressure on. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other reports? I always like to turn to Chairman Frazier if there's any update from the legislature, as you have now reconvened into another battlefield.
Yes, ma'am. So just an update. I introduced AB 1591, a comprehensive transportation funding bill, approximately $7 billion a year of continuous funding. Looking forward to a dialogue with the administration going forward. And as the governor stated many times last year, that there was a $6 billion need at that time. With the true up and the swap, it's now $7 billion a year need, and challenge the legislature to come up with a solution. And I believe we've done that. And so we're looking forward to a dialogue with my colleagues to put California back on the map as a state that cares about supporting business, and as Commissioner Inman has talked about freight, we have a dynamic freight component in it also. And so we're looking forward to moving forward and getting back on in progress on moving forward, as the governor has said there's need. So looking forward to it. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Any other commissioners for report? And I don't know, Will, if the timing, if I'm correct in the timing, but I just wanted to connect as well with the executive director's report that we will be establishing a process for a search for a new executive director as your successor. Is that fair to say?
That is correct. That is correct, Madam Chair, and I should also report that the Commission did meet at a retreat this morning and talked about a number of items, looking forward to the next year and determining a direction on issues of importance to the Commission. We also did discuss the process to replace the executive director. There was no need to adjourn to closed session, so all matters were conducted in public session, and we did have those discussions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Very good. Thank you. All right. And again, thank you, Mr. Chair, Chair Frazier, for your report as well. Next up, our agency secretary, Brian Ennis, is here. Welcome, Brian.
Yeah, good afternoon, and I think I'm going to limit my comments just to congratulations and gratitude on some of the prior discussion. Maybe in the order it came, I wanted to thank Commissioner Dunn for your very effective term as chair through a challenging time, and I think the CTC's had a good year. Some of the things the executive director had alluded to with reports and outreach have been very effective. So thank you for your work, and also, of course, thank Commissioner future Chair Alvarado and Vice Chair Esime for being willing to step up to these increased roles that you will be taking on. I'm, of course, also a big Will Kempton fan, and when he left Caltrans, I sent a note saying how sorry I was I wouldn't be able to kind of, even though I was in another branch of government at that point, to use you as a mentor and somebody I could watch and learn from. So just thrilled when you came back and have had the opportunity over the past year to work with you again, and wish you the best again. Also, I'd like to mention that thrilled to work with Commissioner Kehoe again. I was staffed her on Senate Budget Subcommittee number 4 when you were on that committee, so it's a thrill to work with you again. And again, thank you for, in your work with the Plug-in Collaborative, to reach out to Caltrans a couple years ago and ask that they participate and join, which the department did. So that's been a very valuable experience for the department and for the agency to be able to participate in that as well. Lastly, to Chair Frazier, thank you for your leadership that continues, and of course the governor, as well as Secretary Kelly alluded to, I think in December, has built in the proposal from September into the budget to continue that commitment and discussion with the legislature on solving the transportation funding investment needs. So again, I'll limit my comments to all of those thanks and hand it over to Director Doherty.
Very good. Thank you very much. Any questions for Secretary Ennis? Very good. Director Doherty, welcome.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. Let me also add my congratulations to Commissioner Alvarado as well as Commissioner Assimi. But also I want to thank Commissioner Dunn as well. It's always a pleasure to work with you, and it's been an extra pleasure working with you as the chair, and also welcome to Commissioner Kehoe on the Transportation Commission. the Transportation Commission. I have only one personnel issue. I think we made a permanent appointment of Dave Moore to Caltrans District 2 Director. He was acting just prior to this, so I wanted to emphasize that. I think you're already familiar with him, but he's been with the department for 22 years, so welcome to Dave Moore to District 2. I want to elaborate just a little bit about my experience at the Transportation Research Board as well. At TRB, it's not been a good career move for me to conflict what Will Kempton said, but the attendance at TRB was actually 12,500 attendees, federal, state, local, academia, and private sector participants. It is the largest gathering of transportation professionals in the country each year, and there are 200 plus committees that serve under the Transportation Research Board. I have the good fortune of serving on the TRB Executive Board, So I also participate in some of the decision making on what research money will be spent in the upcoming year. While I was there, I also met with the Federal Highway Administration on the new FAST Act, the freight program, NEPA delegation opportunities, as well as grant money that is included in the FAST Act for road charge pilots. So we will be looking at that for an opportunity in the state of California as we move forward with our road charge pilot as well. I also met with the executive director of the ITS America regarding their annual meeting and their conference, which will be in San Jose in June, which I think is a very apropos place with Silicon Valley to host that meeting, as it is the Intelligent Transportation Society of America, and that is their biggest conference as far as new technology and transportation in the U.S., and that's in San Jose. So I also met with them. And as Will mentioned, the Western Road User Charge Consortium also had a meeting on the first day of the Transportation Research Board, and there are 13 states in the western U.S. in that consortium. We have some 16 projects underway exploring many of the technical and policy questions that our Technical Advisory Committee here in California has also tackled, and actually Norma Ortega is the chair of that steering committee for the Western Road User Charge Consortium, and I appreciate that Executive Director Will Kempton was able to participate in that meeting as well. And then I met with TRB staff once again about research and direction and conducting the business of the executive committee. TRB did identify 3 critical transportation issues that they wanted to focus on in the upcoming year, and this is again in addition to the 200-plus technical committees, as well as bridges, pavement, traffic operations, freight, new technology, connected autonomous vehicles, etc. And those 3 topics, and I can pass out the leaflet that they produced on this, was transformational technologies and its implications on transportation issues, resiliency, and what we can do to deal with the growing threat of natural and man-made disasters, and then public health, the connection between public health and transportation. And they identified those, again, within the confines of the executive committee of TRB. Another recurring theme, and I sat on a couple of panels and also chaired a CEO roundtable. One topic that emerged for me was that resiliency, and I chaired a CEO roundtable on that matter, and I also serve on the TRB's executive committee task force on resiliency and evaluating the vulnerabilities of any interruption to any component of the transportation system and what the implications that will have, and how going forward we make the transportation system less vulnerable and more resilient, and we can recover more quickly from that. So that's just a few very highlights from my participation in TRB as well. Since we met last, I think our most recent version of the mile marker, fourth quarter of 2015, was published, and if you do not have a copy of that, we will make sure you have a copy of that. That, again, is an attempt to try to, in a very good format, provide transportation information and update in a transparent way and performance management way, exchange information. Several items on your agenda today and tomorrow. Certainly, Stephen Keck will talk about budget and allocation capacity and a revised 2016 STIP fund estimate. I think that will generate robust conversation, an update and overview of the 2016 SHOP, and then also discussions about the draft toll facility guidelines. I look forward to each of those agenda items. I will reserve any comments for a more social setting on your executive director, Will Kempton, but I will say that while everybody was going around the room, I had a little bit of an epiphany, and that was when Carl Gardino described perfectly my relationship with Will Kempton, and that was the mentor and the young punk. You can guess which one's which. So with that, I will conclude my comments and be more than happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Director. Questions, comments? Okay. I just want to commend you, Director Doherty and Caltrans staff, for mile marker. I actually read that thing, and I like it. And the only thing that I really would encourage Caltrans to think about is, instead of doing hard copy, which snail mail, people don't read snail mail anymore. If you could put that puppy up online and send it around in the same email chain that we get the sustainability newsletter, and in fact, my dream would be that those two be merged somehow. I would really think that that would be a forward step. I know business groups like mine would viral it into their own business e-newsletter because I think that it has some very good information that the public should hear, and I think it's understandable. So I want to commend you. Thank you.
I certainly appreciate those comments. It is online, but by your comments, I realize I probably don't distribute the digital version of it as well as I should, so we will take that back and continue to talk about the merging of some of the different information we have. So I appreciate the feedback.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Very good. Now it's time for the Vince Mamano Show. FHWA, California Division Administrator. Vince is in the house.
Madam Chair, is this one? Madam Chair, quitter, next to you. I was talking to Mike back there. We were deciding whether or not you were asked to leave or you were leaving on your own. So you will, listen, I'm not judging. It's all right. We'll say you'll be missed because I have to say that in front of people, but you know, you're a Niner fan, so. Happy New Year to you all. Congratulations, though, Will. I'm excited for you. I know that's well-deserved. Madam Chair, we're going to miss you. Bobby, I'm not so sure we're going to love you, but we quite enjoyed you, Madam Chair. So I have a quick 23-slide presentation on the FAST Act. And it will actually be a quick 23-slide presentation on the FAST Act. And I kind of wanted to put it on so you have it now, and if you could distribute it to the commissioners, I'd appreciate that. And then that way you'll have it. So I just wanted to have some of the data on there. As you know, the FAST Act is $305 billion. It's a 5-year legislation. It's $70 billion transfer to keep the Highway Trust Fund paid in full. So this is the $305 billion. The Federal Highway Administration is going to be administering $226 billion of that. Federal Transit, you can see the breakdown of how that is. There was a considerable increase in transit in this also. So now I'll just kind of stick on the federal highway side, the stuff that we're going to be administering. It's a $225 billion in contract authority, $1.1 billion from the general fund. So that means that $1.1 billion is going to have to be appropriated separately every year. The contract authority, as you can see, increases over the 5 years of the thing. It's about a 5.7% higher than 2015, and it grows at about 2% a year, give or take. Some of the apportion programs, you can see some of the increases. This is just a comparison of where we had those and some of the new ones. So, for instance, if you look all the way at the bottom, the National Highway Freight Program is $1.2 billion in funding for the Highway Freight Program, and that's all new, as you can see. We have a new title for the largest program. It's the Surface Transportation Program. It's now been renamed as the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, which I think lines up a little bit more with how it's being administered. Hopefully I'm going too fast for you. This is just kind of a breakdown of how it's all spread out with the dollars, and you could see the National Highway Performance Program is your largest, and then the Surface Transportation Block Program is your next largest, and then there's other smaller pieces to that. The National Highway Performance Program, there's a couple new things that are eligible in it. One of the things that I'll draw your little attention to is that the vehicle to infrastructure communications equipment is now eligible, which it wasn't previously. The new eligibility estate may request the secretary to pay a subsidy for administrative costs for TIFIA and for projects that are on the NHPP. So if you have projects that are on the NHPP that are eligible for TIFIA, then you can use some of your NHPP money to fund the administration of that. So all eligible block grant, surface transportation block grants must be treated as projects on the federal highway system. So that's a little bit of a nuance there. So if you're using anything out of this funding, out of this program, that means it's going to be subject to all the federal requirements. A lot of times there's a separation for things that are done inside the right-of-way and outside of the right-of-way. Davis-Bacon wages is one, for instance. So that's going to be a nuance in there, I think, that we got to pay attention to. So that's just a couple of the things that are there. And again, I'm trying to I'll hit just a few of the things just so that you have this in front of you for later perusing, because I'm sure will be great reading at a later time. The TAP program, it's no longer called the TAP program, but it's all still eligible under the same type of thing. It's part of the set-aside. All transportation alternative projects, excluding projects funded by recreational trails, must be treated as projects on the federal aid highway system. There's a new annual reporting requirement because we can't let you have money without making you annually report about it. With the congestion mitigation and air quality improvement, it adds specific eligibility, like I said, for vehicle to infrastructure communication equipment, adds projects to reduce emissions for port-related equipment and vehicles as eligible to meet the PM 2.5 priority set-aside requirement. And then it also adds an exception for PM 2.5 priority set-asides for states. So it's a little bit to that. It increased the set-aside for the HSIP for railroad highway crossing project program projects from $225 million to $240 million a year. And then just as a side note, in 2016, for the Appropriations Act, it was actually increased all the way to $350 million. So look at that, I'm on slide 12 already. So freight program, a lot of interest in that. There's two sides of that freight program. Some of it's going to be formula related, and some of it's going to be discretionary. The formula related. The act repeals it's a $1.2 billion average apportioned by state. You could see that the projects, it's a highway focus, but less than 10% of it can actually be done for rail, port, and intermodal projects. So it's focusing 90% of it on highway, but you can use up to 10% on the other. And then the discretionary program is going to be interesting to see how that pans out. And I think there's going to be some discussion. I know Fran talked with our administrator about that, and I think there's going to be a lot more discussion going on about what that's going to look like and how that's going to play out. But you're looking
Just send us the checks.
You got it. I got it. I'll give you the checkbook, too. That's no problem. You can play racquetball with it because it bounces all over the place. But so at least 25% of that's going to be reserved for rural projects. At least 10% annually must be reserved for projects that don't meet the usual $100 million cost threshold. And the minimum grant for the set-aside is $5 million. And the federal share for that's going to be is going to be 60%. So there are some other opportunities to use other federal money to cover the other part of that share to get it all the way up to 80%. But that's just some of the pieces to that. Let's get the other. So a couple things for the planning and performance. The statewide planning, you can see it adds new flexibilities with project. We're trying to do some. Did I jump on? I did jump on. There's more consultation on the planning and performance. There's some changes to the MPO process, the selection for the criteria for the officials. So as you can see, that's some basic changes to that, some new planning considerations for resiliency, stormwater management, long-range plan. The accelerating project delivery is a big focus on accelerating project delivery. You're going to hear, I think you've heard about a lot of that under this administration as it is, but I think you're going to continue to hear more and more of that. Some of that's given some additional flexibilities in the 4F process. Those of you who haven't dove into environmental documents near 4F sites, it's very interesting, it's very challenging, and hopefully these exemptions, you're looking at historic properties, archaeological sites, things like that, and historic bridges have really beaten a lot of people up because anything over 50 years. So there should be some exemptions there that should help move that along. Let's see if we can keep moving. All right, so the TIFIA and the ferry boat program. So the TIFIA funding had been cut a fair amount of the TIFIA funding, but as I talked to people about that, it really got cut down to what we're using right now. So it's really no net overall loss to what's being used now in the TIFIA program. It's just been reduced down to about that. There's some other eligibilities now for TIFIA. You can use some of your program money to deal with to help pay for your administration of the TIFIA if that project applies to that program, as we talked about the NHPP earlier. It now requires that. I'm sorry. So that's a little bit about the TIFIA. Ferry boats the same. So ferry boats got a change in that process too. You're looking at now introducing the number of passengers to the formula. I think that'll help California when it comes to the ferry boat program. The HOV, so now you're looking at the technical cleanup of some language. One of the key things I see in this is you must consult with MPO on toll placement amount for hot lanes on interstate facilities within the metropolitan planning area. The ISRRPP, anyone? All right, I had to look it up myself, but it's the I actually knew about it after I saw it. It's the Interstate Reconstruction Rehabilitation Pilot Program. That was one that happened with Safety Lou, came out, and it gave 3 opportunities to toll the interstate for reconstruction. And there's been a lot of changes to that, giving other opportunities for other states to come in because those 3 filled up really quick. You may be familiar with Virginia's I-81 project where they were trying to do the tolling of the truck lanes in Virginia. That was under that program. So they've allowed the opportunity for others to join. It also allows a waiver of sanctions for degraded HOV operations under certain conditions. If you look into that a little bit deeper, it's still requiring all the stuff that we're trying to do. It just might give us an opportunity to waive the sanction of it. So HOVs that are degraded a certain amount, we need to it requires a plan on how you're going to get them up to performing where they need to be. So I think that's it's an opportunity to not get dinged, but it's also an opportunity to try and improve the facility itself. I think we'll jump. There we go. That wasn't too bad. So the big thing I guess I want to reemphasize about this, and Malcolm and I talked about this in December. There's a lot of stuff in this bill. There's a lot of regulation that needs to happen. There's a lot of policy that needs to happen. So my caution is for anybody here to interpret it and say, of course I'm right because I read it this way, and move on without knowing what the policy is and the regulation would be not good, because that's the opportunity where we lose federal funding and all those types of things. So work with my office if you've got a question. My big statement to everybody, all the locals, is always, have you talked with the state on this? Have you talked with the state? Because we're going to work with Caltrans. I know Caltrans has got a team right now that's been put together that's really going after the FAST Act. Giles Giovinazzi is leading that. And I know the Federal Highway is involved in that too, so I appreciate you working with us on that. And we're going to look at opportunities to get that message out when they come together on where we're at. A bunch of white papers I think are going to be put together. And as we move forward, how can we get that out to everybody, get that information out? I imagine we'll have some summit, that type of thing, to try and get as much of this information out to the locals as possible. I think that's all I have. Is that all I have, Malcolm? Is there anything else? Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Gilmetti?
Vince, can you go back to page 12?
Yes, you got it.
You know how to work that thing, right?
Look at me, I went right to it.
Yeah, right there. Can you explain to me a little bit more about the highway focus, but plus or minus 10% for rail important intermodal projects?
No, it's not plus or minus, it's less than 10%. So what it's saying is you can't put more of this program, of this freight money that's coming under this program, this is the apportioned program, you can't put more than 10% on rail projects and intermodal projects just directly for the ports and the rail and intermodal projects. What you can do is you can have grade separations, things like that, but it's under 10% can go towards the rail, port, and intermodal projects.
And do the ports apply for that?
Don't know enough about that yet. I don't know that. A lot of that can come through the states, I would think. Again, it's all coming together on who. There's no regulation on this yet. There's no policy on this yet. They're still putting all this together. So,
but assuming the ports can apply for it, they can use it for rail around the ports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be my guess.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Inman, and then Mr. Gordino.
Wow, these are too many questions.
On the same
I gotta
page.
go. I'm gonna quit like Will does. I'm quitting. Oh, sorry, Will.
You might need something for that reindeer training camp display next year. Anybody who hasn't seen Vince's light show at Christmas, you do need to drive by. On this page 12, you talk about no state freight plan, no freight formula dollars starting in 2018. A number of our states, including California, we've submitted ours, but the actual approval from US DOT, there aren't that many that they've actually approved. So by virtue of the fact that we've turned in our state freight plan, we're clear?
Don't know that answer. I can't even opine. I don't know the answer to that yet. It's still evolving. I think some of the discussion that our administrators talking about going around the country having some freight roundtables, and I think that's the type of thing that that may be discussed in that freight roundtable.
Okay.
These are the bones. There's very little meat put on these bones right now. I mean, we're only looking at a month and a half, or not even quite a month and a half, where this bill has been passed. So I would think that there's
okay. Well, we're here to help.
There.
So if we can help you put meat on those bones, right. And I think really on the nationally significant or whatever the exact description of those competitive grants. It's my understanding those are not going through rulemaking, and that you're going to be issuing a NOFA shortly. Are you hearing the same thing?
I believe you. You're closer to it than I am.
Okay, good. Well, I just want to make sure.
That'll all be administered through the Secretary's office, too.
Okay. Well, we're a long way from D.C., and we're going to be there. So
absolutely.
If I can, Madam Chair, there's language in the appropriations bill that requires all the grants to be given out earlier this year. The deadline is earlier this year because of the election. They don't want grants being awarded that close to a presidential election. I don't remember the exact date, but that's why they're jumping on these NOFAs early, because they have a shortened timeline to administer any grants this year.
Mr. Kempton thinks it's September 1st. Okay, great.
And we do have appropriations all the way till September, which is new to us to have all our money for the whole year this early in the year. Usually we have these continuing resolutions that give us 2-3 months of money, and that's for the state also. We do have all the money all the way till the end of September for the first time in a while. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Gordino.
Vince, excellent presentation. Thank you.
It was okay. See, that's why, Lucy, I'm going to miss you.
Yeah, well, I'm not done with you yet.
Okay, good. All right, good. Bring it on.
Yeah.
Two things. One, we don't have copies of your slides, and if I could get a hard copy.
He's going to email those to everybody.
Good. And two, I'd like to bring you to Silicon Valley, if you don't mind, and have you make that same presentation.
Sure.
And
absolutely.
For a lot of our local elected officials who are trying to figure out how do they make this work, and how do we provide congestion relief in a lot of our urban core areas, if that's okay with you?
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
Chairman Frazier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How much of this plan is predicated on the state match going forward? Is there any at risk because the state wouldn't have the ability to match it?
Well, there's a lot of it that requires a state match, so it's up to the state on whether they can provide that match. There's a lot of opportunity around the state match. I don't say around it, but with toll credits, and there's a lot of opportunity to provide that match in different forms. But I don't think that, Malcolm, I think you'd probably be able to speak better to this. I don't know that Caltrans right now is at risk of not having enough state match to match the federal dollars. There are some states around the country that was a real concern. And then there's a discussion of an opportunity to work with Federal Highway Administration to possibly change that match. There's some opportunity for that too.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Any other commissioners? Vince, I'm not going to let you blow past NEPA exemptions and CEQA replacement in NEPA.
I tried.
I need some in-depth discussion on that. Time is money, and the feds are miserable at allowing us to deal with time.
Now.
I told you I wasn't going to let you off the hook on that.
You know,
one.
Bobby, when are you in office, Bobby? Because I'm just tired of Lucy. She's driving us nuts.
I hear you. I would be tired of me too.
Okay, so that's again. There's no meat on that bone, other than we know that there's an opportunity that could possibly happen like that. It's only an opportunity that's going to be given at the moment to states that are already under NEPA assignments, or there's only a few like that. There's a lot of discussion. I know Malcolm had some discussion with our executive director on NEPA assignment and going that path. There's really, I'd love to give you a lot more, but there is so much to that. There are so many things that, that have opportunity to be a challenge in that. Under state law doesn't have 4F. So if you want to avoid 4F, which is under the DOT Act of 66, you use your state and local funds and you don't have to do 4F. Well, I'd be surprised if Federal Highway is going to be able to say no 4F when you're using federal aid dollars. So there's a lot to what CEQA looks like today, how it represents NEPA today, how they match up, where there isn't the overlap that there needs to be. Because I think CEQA, and I think everybody would argue that CEQA is more stringent than NEPA is, but there are some things that are covered by NEPA that are not covered by CEQA. And I think that's something that's all got to be worked out. And there'll be a lot of discussion on that, primarily probably with the states who are under NEPA assignment now, Texas, California. There's a bunch of them that have portions of full. California's the full NEPA assignment. There's a bunch that have portions of it. Care to opine, Malcolm?
We're looking very closely at the language pertaining to that topic in the FAST Act to see what the details are, and then also we've begun asking questions of FHWA on clarification on some of the language in the FAST Act. The devil's always in the details, but we're going to do our due diligence to see what opportunity it presents us. We were the first out of the gate with the NEPA assignment by a 7 to 8 year head start, and we're going to be the first one to delve into this as detailed as we possibly can to see what opportunities it presents. But we got to understand the details, and we've already asked FHWA for some clarifying questions on some of the language that's in the FAST Act.
Terrific.
And I think the key to this is we're looking to take steps out of the process and make sure everything is covered.
Now you've given me the answers I want to hear.
We're looking that's all part of accelerating project delivery.
Yes.
So if there's opportunities to not duplicate an effort, then that's what we're trying to do in this, I think.
I mean, you guys, you're professionals. You've done this for decades. You know the duplicative process. You can't talk about this stuff anymore. It's really time of getting to a conclusion and getting us, the exemptions we need in order to get our projects. And particularly California, when we're working so hard to figure out what our funding should look like. Sure. I'm preaching to the choir, I get it, but I'm going to say it out loud that it's doing that kind of reform makes our job of asking for funding that much easier. So please highlight that.
There's a lot of opportunity. There's other opportunity at the national level for resource agencies to be working better together. Some opportunities, some things in the law here that require other resource agencies to do something and act in this particular fashion when it's not even they're not normally a highway agency. So there's some pretty good direction in that, and I think that's something the Secretary has really been pushing is accelerating. Victor Mendez, the Deputy Secretary, so he's been the guy you can guess that he was he's our previous administrator with Federal Highway. Has really been pushing the accelerating project delivery because he was in Malcolm's shoes at one point in time with Arizona, so he gets that.
So let us know what we can do to expedite this, Vince. I mean, anything on our side, offline, what we need to do. It's really important, stretching those dollars. Thank you. Thank you, Director. Any other questions? Okay, Vince,
All
you're
right.
going to be glad to see me go now.
Thanks for having me over.
Thank you very much. Next up is our regional agencies moderator, Sarkis Kachek. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. We'd like to welcome Commissioner Kehoe to the Commission. We look forward to working with you. We'd also like to acknowledge Assemblyman Frazier today. To echo earlier comments, and I think he's walking out the room right now. So, but anyway, the regions would like to express our appreciation for Director Kempton. He's been a great partner for the regions, and he's even come to a couple of our RTPA meetings. So, thank you for your support, and we congratulate you on your retirement. And then, regarding updates, the regions met this morning, and we had a very lively discussion on many topics. But I'm going to highlight 3 of them for you because I don't want to give you too much information. But first is the new Federal Transportation Act, or FAST. As you saw from Mr. Romano's presentation, there is a lot of new funding out there and a lot of discussion related to how to implement these programs. So the regions look forward to working with the state on the FAST working group, and we look forward to providing some more in-depth input regarding the programs on the subcommittee. So we appreciate the opportunity to provide that input. Second item is related to the State Transportation Improvement Program. Okay, so we received an update on the revised 2016 fund estimate, which your commission will get a presentation on, and obviously it's not good news. The STIP is looking like we're going to have a negative STIP, and so we're going to have to, instead of delay projects, we actually now have to delete projects. And for regions, this is a really big deal because a lot of these projects that are in the STIP have been worked on for many, many years and help us meet regional and state goals and priorities. And so this is a really hard time. We talked about the schedule for the STIP. Currently, staff will present a schedule with adoption of the revised STIP in May. There is some interest by the regions to delay by 1 month. This would create some issues for our peers in the Central Valley related to conformity, but due to the shock of actually having to delete a project from the STIP, we're going to have to work through our regional boards and our local agencies just to let them know what is happening. And so that's one thing we talked about. Regarding the revised fund estimate, yes, we realize that there's a need for a revised fund estimate, but it's really going to hit us hard. So we're going to be working with the Commission and the state on identifying projects that need to be deprogrammed for the 2016 STIP. Finally, on the STIP, I'd just like to say that we look forward to providing support to Director Kempton. We understand that there will be a letter that will be distributed to the state legislature regarding the impact of the revised STIP and how it's going to cause us to delete projects. So what our goal is to work with CalCog on providing our own letters from our regions that will supplement Mr. Kempton's letter and identify specific projects and how they create jobs or provide safety and so forth. And we're going to direct those letters to our legislators just to show them how the STIP is being impacted in their district. And hopefully, while we're encouraged by current proposals for state funding, we'd like to see some funding for the STIP. And then finally, I'd like to talk about the Active Transportation Program. Today, you will be receiving a presentation on the draft Cycle 3 guidelines, which are scheduled for adoption in the program is scheduled for adoption in 2017. The regions had a robust discussion regarding the schedule. We have very mixed views in terms of when the program should be implemented. Some folks think that we should move forward with adoption with the program next year, with adoption of guidelines either in March or in May. And then there are some regions that think that the program should be delayed a couple years just to allow more time to improve the program. And since the funding for the project is for the program is in later years, but there are also some regions that still have some unfunded projects that need to be funded from ATP Cycle 3, so that they'd like to see the program move forward. With that, I'll conclude my report and take any questions at this time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kempton.
Sarkis, I just wanted to let you know that the letter that you're talking about, the recommendation we have is for the letter to come from the commission, not from me. So it'll be a commission letter, which carries a good deal more weight, I can assure you.
Any other questions? Very good. Thank you for your report. Oh, yes, Assemblyman.
And I guess because you highlighted the underfunding of the STIP and the other reallocation or whatever you want to call it, I guess my question is to Mr. Dougherty about what is the department doing, and as the governor's come out with his budget proposal, and we have had unanticipated revenues come in and also unallocated cap and trade and different things. Have you made the request through different opportunities to the administration to backfill that $65 to $75 million that it's short?
Well, there's an agenda item in a couple of minutes that we're going to talk about the revised fund estimate that'll show the implications of this. But I think most of the proposals, including the administration's proposal, has a Board of Equalization fix in it, which would backfill the source of the money for the STIP that's being lost. So I think that that's contained in his proposal.
Good to hear.
Very good. Any other questions? Sarkis, are your regional agencies talking to their own legislators about what you're about to go through with defunding projects?
Some are, and we do that just through our own communication, but we want to step up our effort because we think that, especially now that we're actually deleting a project, that's going to have more teeth to it, but we have been communicating with our legislators.
Thank you very much. Keep us apprised of that, please.
Will do.
Next up, Rural Counties Task Force Chair, Jerry Barton. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Welcome, Commissioner Kehoe. And Commissioner Dunn, thank you for your leadership over the past year.
Thank you.
Director Kempton, on behalf of the 26 member agencies, the Rural Counties Task Force would like to wish you all the best in retirement and thank you for all the support that you've given us over the many years. And we definitely, I don't think it'd be overstating it to say Director Kempton is a legend in transportation.
Certainly in his own mind.
Our CTF members are pleased with the announcement of AB 1591 and the Governor's Transportation Infrastructure Proposal. The current transportation funding crisis and massive decline in STIP funding poses a tremendous challenge to rural areas which typically rely on STIP funding as the primary fund source for large projects. The urban-centric nature of the cap-and-trade programs, combined with our geographic challenges to support robust transit systems, put us at a disadvantage in competing for the state's existing available funding programs. Like many others, we're very hopeful that action will be taken soon to support and approve legislation that will provide a continuous and sustainable fund source for transportation for a diversity of the region throughout California. We recently prepared a comment letter for the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Grant Program guidelines, and we outlined 7 areas of concern for rural areas related to this program, and unfortunately only one of those areas of concern was addressed. So while the 10% set aside for rural innovation project areas is promising, we definitely remain concerned that few, if any, rural agencies will be able to apply given the high number of barriers to rural participation in that program. During our January 15th meeting, we were able to discuss the proposed revisions to the guidelines in the ATP program for Cycle 3, and our membership is supportive of added language to the safety section to reduce potential accidents. In rural areas, there are typically minimal or no active transportation facilities, less active transportation travel, and fewer incidents to quantify. So given that, we definitely are supportive of that additional language to the safety section. The guidelines also propose a reduction in disadvantaged community points by 5, so from 10 to 5, and our membership is divided over that. We don't have consensus, but I believe that from, as far as I can tell, about half of our membership are able to obtain those disadvantaged community points and half are not. So 13 counties are and 13 are not, as far as I can tell, approximately. We do support a contingency list for the small and rural set-aside, and we understand that there is some interest in delaying Cycle 3. And our membership has indicated that we support moving forward with the current Cycle 3 schedule as proposed by CTC staff. We do not support a delay. We want to maintain the momentum that's going in the program. We're familiar with it at this point and ready to continue to prepare applications and want to have that extra time to do so. That's all the comments I have today. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Questions? The only question I have for you, Jerry, thank you very much for your report. I'm particularly touched by the rural counties being particularly hit by our funding shortfall. Have any of the counties members that you work with, are they reaching out with their legislators on this issue?
Yes, absolutely. It's certainly something that we will be addressing as a group, as a whole, and I will be distributing any letters for support out to the group and encouraging them to contact their legislators as well.
I think it would be very helpful if each of our chairs and moderators here in these reports would share with us the comments coming back from their legislators. What are the issues? I personally would be very intrigued to hear what you're hearing at the local level, if that's appropriate. So any work that you do there, if in your next report you could come back and let us know, it just helps us be able to assess how we're doing here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Next up is our Self-Help Counties Coalition Chair, Diane Steinhauser. Doesn't look at all like Diane. This is my cousin, ladies and gentlemen.
Sorry to disappoint you, Cousin Lucy. But I'm here filling in for Diane today. Keith Dunn, Executive Director of the Self-Help Counties Coalition. Without repeating everything that was said forth, I also was at TRB. Wonderful event, a bit overwhelming. Learned a lot, had a good experience, and hopefully they're going to look to incorporate some of the technologies that are being prioritized there here in California and working to establish that throughout some of our members. Again, with the STIP, we too, even though our counties have passed measures that are raising revenues, as you know, funding doesn't come from one source. So we also collectively are going to be looking at opportunities to help call out and identify the funding crisis that we're looking at the state level. We think that without a stable source of funding at the state, it creates a real problem for not only those counties that don't have a self-help measure, but also for those of us that do. So we'll be talking to our members. We'll be happy to share with you that information as well.
Terrific.
Thank you for your service. Also, Will, before I get too far down the line, thank you for your continued service. I expect that we'll continue to work together in some capacity in whatever new role you look to take on. And also wanted to welcome Senator Kehoe to the commission. Enjoyed working with you in the legislature and looking forward to working with you here. So Self-Help Counties has been, again, without repeating what the comments that were previously made, we've had a few unique issues that have popped up in the last couple months. One is a federal issue dealing with the collection of fuels at airports. It has impacted, it is going to impact everyone that has an airport in their jurisdiction and how those fuels are collected. It's a little difficult for the state to determine how and where that fuel is taken in and what its exact use is. So we've been working with Senator Boxer's office and just begun discussions with the T&I committee to try and find a solution here in California. So we'll keep you apprised of that. There's going to be a markup of the FAA reform bill in the next coming weeks, which we hope to have a solution for California inserted in that process. And literally this evolved in the middle of November, and it's kind of gotten a little steam going forward. So feeling a little optimistic, but we're going to be seeking an exemption for California if possible. You're going to hear later today in the 194 guideline development comment from our vice chair from Orange County, Gerald Johnson, on how we believe that 194, we hope the guidelines will continue to be developed. We've been working with your staff, been doing a wonderful job, I think, in interpreting the legislative intent of our author, chairman of the Transportation Committee, who's with us here today, and thank you for that. But we're looking forward to continue to participate in those guideline development and offer our comments to hopefully make sure that it's a process that follows the intent of the legislature, but also is delivering the projects that we believe are going to save our taxpayers time and money. So we're very thankful to be able to participate in that process. Moving forward, we're looking forward to supporting Chairman Frazier and the governor, and I think the Senate will likely have something as well, but in trying to identify some stability and funding for the state. It's a big lift. I think that there's a lot going on within the member caucuses and different priorities, but we're going to make sure that they understand that without this stability at the state, it's a three-legged stool. We need that state to have a stable source so we can move forward and deliver on the promises that we've made to our voters. So we're looking forward to a productive year and working with the commission and helping you move forward. And thank you very much. I'll take any questions if you have any.
Thank you very much, Keith. Questions? Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
It takes a village, people, and so any information that you can share with us on the comments coming up from your areas, I think, are extremely helpful in this. All right, moving on to policy matters. Item number 13 is an information item in our Commission's charge for innovation and new technology in transportation. We have a little bit of a 10-minute presentation. Garth Hopkins, Chris White.
Yes, Commissioners, at the January CTC meeting, staff wanted to highlight hydrogen fuel cell technology and its upcoming impact on transportation. Hydrogen fuel cells represent the next leap forward for zero-emission vehicles. As additional vehicle manufacturers roll out these type of vehicles, Californians will begin seeing more and more of this technology on the road in the future. One of the first examples being Toyota's recent announcement of the availability of their fuel cell vehicle called the Mirai. We are fortunate to have Ms. Chris White, the Communication Director for the California Fuel Cell Partnership located here in West Sacramento, here today to talk to us and give us an update on this technology.
And I was told 5 minutes, so 10 is like a luxury.
Oh, well, 5, if you do it in 5, then there's more time for questions. So, and cookies as a reward.
Thank you for having me today. I am Chris White, the Communications Director at the California Fuel Cell Partnership. The Fuel Cell Partnership is a public-private collaborative, government and industry working together to commercialize fuel cell vehicles. To put it a little bit in perspective, we've gone from a science fair project to cars that are for sale in about 15 years, which is truly remarkable when you think of all of the different pieces involved with making a car, buying a car, driving the car, fueling the car, insuring the car, servicing the car, every little bit, plus all of those policies, rules, and regulations that have to come along with it as well. So to give you just the really quick, in case you don't know, a fuel cell vehicle is an electric vehicle that makes its electricity from hydrogen. You swing into a station, fill up the tank in a couple of minutes, you have enough range to go about 300 miles or so on the tank of car, and the only emission is a little bit of water vapor, and it's water so clean you can drink it. So where are we today? We have 3 fuel cell vehicles that are available today. They are the Toyota Mirai, the Hyundai Tucson fuel cell vehicle, the Mercedes F-Cell, which has been for lease for a while, and the Honda Clarity, the new Clarity, will be coming available later this year. Nearly every major automaker has a plan to build a fuel cell vehicle, and that includes things like Lamborghinis and Audis and some of the upper-end cars, as well as the ones that we have today. But it's not just limited to cars. 2 California transit agencies operate fleets of fuel cell buses. The AC Transit program is the largest fuel cell bus program in the United States, and they have been operating one bus for longer than anybody expected. It was designed to run 5,000 operating hours. In September, it passed 20,000 hours. And it's still driving 16 hours a day, picking people up, dropping them off, making no noise as it does it. The other agency is Sunline Transit Agency. They have operating all American fuel cell buses. They are built in the United States, every component, every piece. And Sunline is the first to commit to becoming what we call a center of excellence. That means they plan to put 40 fuel cell buses into service in the next few years. We're also starting our first pilot projects for freight at the ports of Los Angeles and in Long Beach. We're rolling out some pilot programs that are happening with FedEx and UPS. The UPS program will be right here in West Sacramento, spitting distance from our office at the Fuel Cell Partnership. And we're working now with some of the truck manufacturers, Kenworth and Peterbilt, most particularly, on how they can start putting in fuel cells both as APUs, auxiliary power units, and as major propulsion. So you see, fuel cells aren't just for cars anymore. We've had all of this focus on vehicles. And with vehicles coming to market, we've had to change our focus a little bit to where do you get the fuel? That's the first question people ask me. Where do you get the fuel? Well, I fill mine in West Sacramento where we have a retail hydrogen station. But we spent several years as a group looking at where do you get the fuel? What's the best idea? Do you build a station from the ground up? Is it incorporated with the fleet yard? Is it part of a university? And really the simplest answer was the best. Put it at a gas station. They're already designed for an ebb and flow of cars every 5 minutes. They're used to running 24-hour operations. They're used to having unattended service where people take care of themselves. They're used to dealing with fuel. They know all, and they're conveniently located. So those stations are now going into existing gas stations. And people drive there every day and fuel them up. You know, I have to admit, sometimes I drive my gas car too, and I drive up to the hydrogen pump, and I think, why can't this work? And then I go, oh, I'm at the wrong place. We do see people trying to fill up their gas cars because the pumps look just like a gas station. It's a very simple and convenient operation. But the big question is, where do you put them? Anybody know how many gas stations we have in California? About 9,000. We don't need that many hydrogen stations. We don't need one on every corner. It needs to be a little bit more like diesel and how diesel is at certain stations. So the Fuel Cell Partnership came up with a plan that talked about 100 stations statewide. We are on our way to the 100. We have 6 retail stations open today. By the end of today, we may be at 7, but we have 7 that are imminent. So within the next 2 weeks, we should have 7 more open. 13 more coming right behind that. By the end of the year, 58 should be open. And then the next phase will get under construction. So you see on my map here, and not everything's reflected on the map, we have a couple that are blue. Those are other stations. That one happens to be the AC Transit station that fills buses. So we have passenger vehicle stations and heavy-duty stations as well. Some of these stations, or I should point, there's our Los Angeles map too, and we just opened a station in Coalinga. So now you can drive from Los Angeles to Sacramento and San Francisco. I've made the drive twice now. It's pretty nice. You know, it's still driving through the Central Valley. It's not really exciting, but you can do it. And soon we'll be opening a station in Truckee too, so be able to take your fuel cell vehicle skiing. Station in Napa will be coming online. We expect Santa Barbara by probably the end of the month. So those stations are coming online where you can take your car on vacation as well. Some of these stations are making their fuel on site. Some of them are making it at a central production facility. The fuel is made from natural gas, from solar electrolysis of water, from wind electrolysis of water, from biomass, from biogas. AC Transit's bus station in Oakland makes all of their fuel for their buses from garbage. So it gives us a great way to make our fuel. All of our fuel is made domestically, and it gives us tremendous energy resilience because we are not dependent upon outside sources of fuel, and we're not dependent on only one fuel stock. So we're making great strides with this and what we're doing. And I was really hoping to hear from Vincent a little bit about the provision in the FAST Act for the clean fuels corridors. Because California is remarkably positioned to take advantage of the clean fuels corridor, which calls for highway corridors with hydrogen, electricity, propane, and natural gas. And we're very much on our way to that. We at the Fuel Cell Partnership work closely with our sister organization, the PEF Collaborative. We've already started talking about how we can put together a joint webinar to understand those clean fuels corridors a little bit more. So we do see that battery electric vehicles and fuel cell electric vehicles are very complementary technologies that are working together to reduce the amount of gasoline that we're using and provide cleaner transportation for our state. Last thing I want to point out is we just on Friday launched a new station map on our website. It's a very interactive map that you go on, you type in your zip code, it will show you the stations that are nearest your house, it will tell you when one's going to open, it'll tell you how it works, all sorts of cool stuff. So please take a look at this since we just launched it Friday. I would love to hear people's feedback on this works for me. Tell you one thing I learned, if you type in San Francisco instead of address, it takes you to San Francisco, Chile, unless you add California, so we're fixing that bug. So that was the end for me. Questions I could answer for you.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. Questions? Yes. Commissioner Kehoe.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, great job. Thank you for this up-to-date report. I'm so glad the stations are coming on so quickly. How close are we to hitting the 100 station mark? Care to venture a guess when we'll cross that line?
Well, the plan was to have 100 stations by 2020. And according to the AB8 report that the ARB put out and the Energy Commission put out, we are right on track with that right now. So we're doing very well. There's a lot of balancing of which comes first, stations or cars, stations or cars. And we learned that the answer is stations have to come first. But stations are owned by independent businesses. They can't sit with an asset that's not making money for them. So that station can't be open too far ahead of the car. So it's very much a juggling act.
Thank you for mentioning the California Plug-in Electric Vehicle Collaborative, my organization. We're kind of sister organizations. These are not competing technologies. Plug-in electric vehicles are maybe couple years ahead of the consumer adoption of the fuel cell vehicles. But Chris, maybe you could comment a little bit on where we will not be able to reach our true zero emission vehicle goals without moving to fuel cell vehicles to really get to zero emissions.
The state's perspective as well as the federal government is that everything's important. There is here's my own theory. We would be foolish to move from 98% of our cars running on one fuel to 98% of our cars running on any one other fuel. If we really want to be a smart state and a smart country, we're going to diversify. And we're going to look at all forms of electric vehicles, fuel cell and battery electric. We're going to look at how we can encourage people to walk more and ride the bus and combine their trips and take the train. So all of those have to work together if we're going to get to where we want to be with reducing greenhouse gases.
Thanks so much. Fuel Cell Partnership is doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Osemi.
Chris, what is the cost of a fuel cell bus versus a regular natural gas or all electric bus? And diesel, and then also the operating cost difference, and especially in cars. Do you have those dollars?
So I can give you where we are right now. A natural gas bus is a commercially available vehicle. And the Department of Transportation has these things that are the technology readiness levels. We are in the fuel cell buses at TRL number 7, which is 2 steps away from commercial. So that means right now the buses are more expensive than a natural gas bus. The operating data that AC Transit has so far shows that the wear and tear is much less than a natural gas bus because it has no moving parts. Their biggest repair has been the air conditioning system so far. And they are so much more efficient that they're finding the operating cost of these, and these are demonstration buses, these aren't production, are already less than a natural gas vehicle. So the assumption is in this whole thing with Sunline moving to a center of excellence, at a 40 bus order, they should be on par for purchase price as a natural gas bus and less cost to operate per mile. And I have to admit, I'm not the bus expert. That's Nico Balkamp in our office.
So about the same cost and less operational cost.
Yes.
Do you know roughly how much less operational cost?
I don't off the top of my head.
How about in the cars? Do you have an idea on the Toyota?
Interesting thing with the cars right now is all the fuel is free. So right now they are a heck of a bargain to drive.
And how much is it? How does the cost of the car compared to a regular?
The Toyota fuel cell vehicle is $57,500 to buy or $500 a month to lease. That includes all your maintenance and it includes all your fuel. You also get a $5,000 cash rebate from the state of California and at least a $1,400 federal tax rebate, thanks to them extending that 2 weeks ago. So there's where it costs. And if you're a fleet in a Cal and virus grain area, you get a $15,000 rebate, cash rebate from California.
Thank you.
Yes. Any other questions, comments? Very good. Thank you, Chris. Excellent presentation.
Well, thank you. And we would sure love to have Caltrans become a member of the Fuel Cell Partnership.
That's great.
Next time you're in Central California, you look up Fresno. We'll give you a nice tour.
Well, and actually, I was about to say the same thing. If you listen to UCI, University of California at Irvine, they consider themselves the fuel cell capital of the planet. But then AQMD, South Coast Air Quality Management District, considers themselves the fuel cell capital of the planet. So I love that we're all vying for that.
Well, and they are
title.
both members of the Fuel Cell Partnership.
Excellent.
So California is the fuel cell capital of the planet.
There you go. Good girl. Thank you very, very much. All right. Next up is consideration item number 14 of state and federal legislative matters, and action item. Eric Thronson.
How you doing?
How are you doing?
I'm all right. Just trying to make sure these microphones are working. Commissioners, thank you. We have a few issues to discuss in this item. So first of all, I wanted to point out, as Executive Director Kempton said, we have received a lot of support for the Commission's legislative and administrative recommendations in our annual report, and so staff is working diligently with the legislature and others to move these proposals forward as best we can. There's a lot of them, and so there's a lot of calls with a lot of ledge staff to try to sort out how we might be able to move many of them forward. Second, in the book item, there are bills of interest. There's a few that the Commission has taken positions on from 2015 that are still technically alive, and so therefore staff is, reporting on them. If you have any questions about them, let us know. And there are also a few that have been introduced since the legislature has come back into session in January that are of interest. And if commissioners have any questions about them or have any thoughts about potential positions we may want to take moving forward on any of these bills, please let staff know. We will bring in March a more comprehensive list because, of course, by then all bills will be introduced, the introduction deadline being in mid-February. Particular interest, I guess, is, as Assemblymember Frazier pointed out, he introduced his proposal for funding transportation and reforms in California. That goes along with the governor's proposal in the January budget and Senator Bell's proposals that were released last year. There's a lot of funding proposals out there. A lot of them, the three of them really have a lot in common. There are a few minor differences. In your book item, there is a side-by-side kind of snapshot comparison of the three. If anyone has questions about that handout, please let staff know or ask them now or at the end if you'd like. We will do our best to answer any questions you have about that. But as you can see, they're very similar. They all have a lot of the same intentions. They're based in really basic transportation funding theory, which I think is important. And so, how this will all sort out is anybody's guess. But at least there are a lot of folks from every side trying to make this work, and that's a very positive move for transportation funding. As has been alluded to, and I think Executive Director Kempton has also commented, there will be a letter outlining the Commission's support for funding and reform proposals that responsibly address the state's needs, as well as describing the problem that we are going to be discussing later on about the STIP and our lack of funding for that. Staff recommends that the Commission send a letter such as this to the legislature. I think that'll take a formal action by you all, and we will make sure that letter gets sent.
Madam Chair, if I could just interrupt staff for a moment on this. I want to just clarify, because there was an additional pink that came afterwards on tab 14 with respect to that second recommendation, where it says send a letter to the legislature supporting the general concept of all transportation funding and reform. those words have been added on, and reform proposals. So it now reads, in supporting a general concept of all transportation funding and reform proposals which responsibly address the state's crumbling transportation infrastructure. For some reason, the pink, which supersedes the yellow, didn't get included, at least in a couple of the packets.
And in fact, for those of you watching from home, the only difference between the pink and the yellow is the addition of "and reform proposals" on that line. So in case
Which is consistent with our prior letters and
absolutely.
Support language, right?
Yes, Madam Chair. And so I don't want people to wonder, what else has changed? That's the only thing that's changed from the yellow book items released last week. So finally, one other issue in this book item to discuss is the suggestion that staff proposes that the Commission communicate to the legislature its support for sending the new formula freight funding, new federal formula freight funding. When Vince kept talking about the 4F, I thought that's what he meant, was federal freight formula funding, through the TCIF program or something similar to that, as the Commission knows, and I think a lot of people would agree, that was a very successful bond program, the TCIF, and there is, because of SB 1228, Senator Hueso's bill from 2 years ago, created that program into perpetuity. I think staff thinks that this would be a great way to send federal funding to allocate not appropriate, allocate the funding, the federal funding that's coming through the TCIF program. So with that, we would also ask that the Commission, we recommend that the Commission, adopt or suggest to staff that we communicate to the legislature that we believe that that's a good way to administer that funding.
I move staff recommendation.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Arp, second by Commissioner Gilmetti. Any discussion? We're all on the page with the pink, right? We all have that. Okay, very good. Yes, Commissioner Gilmetti.
Right. Before we vote, Eric, I wanted to compliment you on this side-by-side chart. I think that it's very easy to read, very easy to understand, and it really gives you a fair comparison between all the proposed programs today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. I concur. All right. Ready for action? All those in favor of the recommendations?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstention? Okay, Eric, you've got your recommendations approved. Anything more? For item 14. Okay. Done with that. Are we okay? Thank you, Commissioner. Item 15, update on the Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee and Pilot Program. Mitch Weiss, an information item.
Commissioners, first off, as hopefully everybody on the dais and probably everybody in this room hopefully knows, the Technical Advisory Committee last week sent a letter from the chair, Madaffer, and from Brian Kelly to the legislature, and with Caltrans issued a press release and had a push to get their recommendations out into the public sphere more, and their desire to and the need to get 5,000 volunteers to make this work. I think probably just about everybody in this room got an email from me last Friday. So that push has begun. Caltrans has updated their website to more effectively intake the volunteers, and we have now about 1,700 registered people wanting to volunteer. They're continuing their outreach. One of the next things they're doing is a flyer in DMV's mailer for people who are registering their vehicles that will go out over the next several months. There's the contractor that is implementing the pilot is evaluating proposals for the subcontractors that will be doing the different pieces of the pilot program, and Caltrans has selected a contractor to be the independent evaluator of the program. Lastly, I would mention the TAC has a schedule to meet quarterly in 2016 to address a number of policy issues as we get data from the pilot program, and I will be keeping you informed of their efforts. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, Commissioner Inman.
Mitch, in terms of the outreach, it seems like we need about, 15,000 names so that we can get a good, robust group of volunteers?
They've estimated 10 to 15,000.
What about the highway message signs? Do we have restrictions? I mean, can you use that? I see drought messages on that, but...
The rules that govern the use of the changeable message signs are spelled out in the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which FHWA has approved. And we really do limit that to information that benefits the motoring public and to safety messages and things like that as much as possible. I would have to ask Vince for permission to do that, and he's already told me no.
Very good.
Ask him again.
Okay. Mr. Frazier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to let the Commission know that in its inception, I did vote no on that bill from Senator DeSagne because I had some serious reservations. But after Mr. Medaffer's work, I've actually registered online to be a participant.
Good.
To go forward and look forward to going in it with open eyes.
Very good. Thank you very much.
And I want to thank him for the fact that he just acknowledged that when he's driving, he will have his eyes open.
Director Kempton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to add that...
Hey, guys, stay with us.
That Chair Frazier acknowledged Commissioner Medaffer's role in this. He has been literally a whirlwind of activity, and the outreach effort that he's engaged in is quite significant. Now, he's gone someplace else again, so I don't know where he is, but he just spoke today to 350 members of the League of California Cities to get more information about this out to them, and the distribution it goes beyond just those individual people, because they will have access to city staff. They'll have access to any of the organizations that the cities are dealing with. So it's exponential in terms of the impact, and that's the kind of thing we need to do. We really we are now in the recruitment phase, and I think the director and Norma Ortega would agree that we've got to really spend a good deal of time over the next couple of months to make sure we get that 10 to 15,000, whatever the number is, so that we can have a viable pilot program here in the state.
Any other questions or comments? Malcolm, I have really strong opinions on wanting this to succeed, as you well know, and I would ask if maybe I could get on your calendar with Mr. Medaffer to talk about not necessarily Caltrans always leading on this, but using your business partners to help get out the word. I mean, between Carl Guardino's group, our Real Coalition, we're just asking for signups. And a lot of people are now, for example, in one group that I was with, wanted to go tell their legislatures to vote no on 1077. You know, the misinformation, but getting out early and in front of this to allow your private sector partners, as we have been effective with local sales tax measures, this might be a time to kind of replicate this at the state level. If I could chat with you about that and have Mr. Medaffer.
I look forward to that conversation. We're going to need all the help we can get to be able to get the pool of candidates and volunteers that we need. Time is of the essence. We're trying to compile 5,000, get a pool of 5,000 from potentially 10 to 15,000 volunteers in the next couple of months.
Right. I totally get it. So,
great idea, Chairwoman, and sign us up, Malcolm.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Send to us whomever we need to speak with to promote it.
Yeah, it'd be great. Thank you. All right, anything else on this one? Item number 16, update on the public forums on transportation. Speaking about road charge, Garth.
Yes, Commissioners, the CTC has co-sponsored 7 regional public forums on transportation held around the state that began last May in Fresno and concluded just last week in Riverside. There were 3 primary purposes for these forums. They were 1, raise awareness of the statewide transportation infrastructure and funding challenges, 2, discuss the road charge pilot program, and 3, provide an opportunity for both the commissioners and CTC staff to gain a better understanding of specific regional transportation issues from the attendees at these forums. The general feedback that we received has been positive, and the level of turnout at these forums was pretty good. Staff wants to recognize and thank both the regional transportation agencies and Caltrans for assisting the Commission in preparing and notifying their respective stakeholders of various of these forums. These forums would not have been successful without their efforts. In addition to the members of the public that attended each of the forums, the success of these forums can be attributed to the presenters. At each of the forums, either one or more of the commissioners was in attendance, along with Will Kempton, to represent the CTC. And Malcolm Doherty, or another high-level official from Caltrans, was there. And then also, of course, executives from the respective regional transportation agency where the forum was going to be held. And then also representatives from the business community were also there to help present. The time and effort from each of these presenters was much appreciated. In summary, staff felt that the forums provided a good opportunity to continue dialogue with our regional transportation partners and other stakeholders. The forums also reinforced that although there are similar statewide transportation issues, there are also distinct regional differences, and that came out at these forums. And that's all I have.
Very good. Thank you. Commissioners, comments? Okay. Thank you, Garth. Appreciate that report. Item number 17, update on the budget and allocation capacity. Laurel and Stephen, information item.
Commissioners, Stephen has a good presentation.
Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. When I was sitting in the back, I had a hard time hearing whoever's at the podium. Can the folks in the back hear me okay? Good. Okay. I talk a little bit louder than some other folks, so it probably will work. Before I start, I want to acknowledge a little disagreement between Director Doherty and my former director, Will Kempton, regarding the TRB numbers. There were 12,000 participants and 5,000 individual presentations at the TRB meeting in D.C. So both were right with numbers.
Everybody got to talk.
I'm the numbers guy, so I find a way out of anything. So I'm going to start today's presentation with our traditional look at allocation capacity and where we are with allocating projects. We are through December, this December CTC meeting, we have allocated about 34% of the allocation capacity, about $1.1 billion of $3.1 billion in total capital capacity. Of the amount that's remaining to be allocated, about 60% is for the shop. And there's $257 million remaining for the STIP program, which I think has been talked about several times today and will be talked about later, is not enough to fund all the projects programmed in the current year. All the rest of the capacity is dedicated to programs that are fully funded for projects programmed in the current year, the TCRP, the ATP, the Transit and Intercity Rail Program, and some bond savings that we're recycling into new projects are all fully funded for the year. Earlier this month, the governor did release his budget for the state, including, of course, the budget for transportation. And in that release, the governor did include his proposal for transportation. Hopefully, this is a good stepping stone to get the conversation re-energized. Assemblymember Fraser's bill is another great step in that direction. We're getting folks to start talking about this again. So I'm going to very briefly talk about what the governor's transportation plan includes, because we didn't really do that back when the governor released the plan. And then I'll take questions. So I'll be brief as possible and then move on possibly to the next item where we're going to talk about the fund estimate. So the governor's plan includes $36 billion in funding, in new funding for transportation from a variety of existing and new resources, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. It's proposed to be split evenly between state and local priorities, and it does include repayment of those pesky loans that have been outstanding for as much as 12 years now over the next 4 years. So I'll talk about the revenues that are proposed in the governor's package, and before I even do that, I want to point out that these revenues will require a 2/3 vote of the legislature, so this is a tough hill to climb just right off the bat. But the governor's proposal includes a $65 per vehicle road improvement charge that is estimated to take effect in January of 2017. It's about midway through the next fiscal year. That will generate about $2 billion a year when it's in full effect. It's estimated to generate about $1 billion in the first year. The proposal includes $500 million in existing cap and trade fees to be moved into transportation proper, and I'll talk about the uses of those funds in the next few slides. The following year, in 17-18, the governor's proposal fixes the broken price-based excise tax by fixing it at 18 cents a gallon. So instead of this going up to 18 cents, going to 21.5, coming down to 18, going down to 12, and possibly 10 next year, the governor's proposal fixes it at 18 cents in perpetuity. Also, beginning in 2017-18, there is a 11-cent increase on diesel excise taxes, bringing the total diesel excise tax rate up to 24 cents per gallon. And then the following year, 2018-19, we begin to index all excise taxes on fuel to inflation, so it will grow as the cost of doing business grows, which is, I think, an important component of any new revenue plan, and it's something that's been lacking over the last 20 years. And while it's not necessarily a new revenue, I should note that the governor's plan also includes reform and efficiencies at Caltrans. The governor's plan includes $100 million in savings and cost avoidance through innovation and efficiencies. And these would be the things like innovative delivery methods, limited CEQA exemptions, and staffing flexibility that would allow us to do things smarter and therefore cheaper. As I mentioned, it does include a repayment of the $879 million in outstanding transportation loans. These are the loans mostly from the Traffic Congestion Relief Fund that occurred in the early 2000s. It does come with some strings. The governor is proposing to repay the loans over the next 4 years, repaying directly back to the state highway account $132 million, which would be used for maintenance and rehabilitation. $265 million would go into transit and intercity rail capital program. $334 million would go into a trade corridor enhancement program, which is intended to mimic the trade corridor infrastructure program, which was part of 1B. And $148 million would go to reimburse TCRP projects that are already programmed. The idea being with a TCRP program now 16 years old, if you're not programmed now, you're not going to get funded. So there are two new transportation programs in the governor's proposal. One is the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, which, as I just said, is intended to follow the same guidelines as the very successful Proposition 1B program. So these would be investments going towards sustainable freight strategies. And again, it's intended to follow the exact same guidelines, and there's $200 million a year that comes from the diesel tax increase for that program. And then there's a new low-carbon road program, which is funded in part with the cap and trade revenues. It's $100 million to encourage active transportation type road investments. These are the kind of projects that include safety improvements for active transportation modes. It does include complete street components, some traffic signal optimization type of projects. It's slightly different from our active transportation program, but it's a certainly good complement to that program. And in this program, half of the funds would be dedicated towards disadvantaged communities. So as we look at the program overall, we start off with about half of the revenues in the first year because of the way the taxation will start to occur. There's $500 million in new funding for the shop. There's about $500 million for local cities and counties, $200 million for the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, $100 for the Low Carbon Program, $400 million ongoing for the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program. And these programs increase over time. So as we look at the average annual amount column in the second column on this chart, that's the average over 10 years. So you start out a little lower, and by the end of the 10 years, these programs would be even higher than $3.6 billion a year, mostly because of that inflation adjustment that we'll see in the tax proposal. So, as I mentioned, this proposal must be approved by the legislature. It does include new taxes, which will require a 2/3 vote. The governor also proposes to bring forward a amendment to the Constitution that will protect all these revenues, hopefully under lock and key, and we won't see any shifting of priorities in the future. So finally, as we look at upcoming events, the Board of Equalization will release its price-based excise tax rate for next fiscal year in March. So it's really probably the worst timing for us, as we'll talk about in the next book item with fund estimate. It is expected to be pretty dismal news, so I don't think it'll be a surprise to anybody, but it's 1 month after we're going to be looking at changing our own estimates for the fund estimate. In April, you can look forward to what we call the transportation funding package, and I call Chart C and Friends. This is the 3-foot by 4-foot chart. It is a flow chart of how transportation funding works in California. If nothing else, it's a great chart to just point at and say, this is too complicated and we need to fix this. That'll be going out in April. The May revise comes out in May, which makes sense, and this is the governor's update for revenues and expenditures for the statewide budget. And then, of course, in June, we expect to see a new budget overall, and, of course, hopefully a new budget for transportation that includes at least some of this proposal, let's say the good parts of this proposal, and maybe even more funding. And with that, I'll be happy to take questions.
Commissioners, yes, Commissioner Semi.
Question: the locals can use their money as they choose.
So the governor's plan includes different transportation funding programs. Some of the money will go directly to locals. That is a portion similar to current formulas that allows them to use it in any way that they like. The Transit and Intercity Rail program is a local program that will be, I think, a program run out of agency that will be, I think it's going to be grants-based. The low carbon program, local program, will be run through local assistance, I believe, out of Caltrans, and it will also be a grants type of program. So with the exception, I think, of those two programs, the funding that goes to the locals will be more like traditional transportation funding.
I think there's a commitment for some of the money to be Fix It First for the shop, for us on the state highway system, but also for the local transportation system as well, right?
Yes, that's the general idea. But it will be for any transportation purpose ever.
Madam Chair, if I could just clarify, you said that that the locals could use the funding for any purpose that they chose. It's for transportation.
Yes.
But yeah,
yes.
I just wanted to clarify that. The public does not understand that, and I think it's very critical that we always say for transportation.
Point taken, and a good one.
Mr. Frazier.
Stephen, last year it was determined that there was a $59 billion need going forward, and I guess it's been determined that we've been pretty lucky, even though with the horrific drought conditions that we've had for severely impacted communities. For transportation, it's been a kind of a bonus because it hasn't really been an issue with undermining and whatnot because of a lot of rain. With the advent of El Nino coming up and one of these things, has there been a new forecast been made for what will be needed, like was forecast last year was $59 million going forward? And then with this $36 billion 10-year proposal, what is your formula for every dollar we don't spend on the additional money, how much it's going to cost us in the future? And what is the proposal for those projects that can't be funded going forward? Do we just turn those roads back into gravel?
So that's a lot of questions there. So let me start with which I think is the first one. So right now, our current estimate for the shortfall in the shop is $57 billion, $5.7 billion a year. That's based on the last approved 10-year plan for the shop. I don't believe, and maybe I should defer to Director Dougherty with regards to new estimates based on the effects of El Nino. I am not aware of any estimates based on that. Certainly, any project that's put off will increase cost over time. As part of the fund estimate that was adopted in August, we include an estimated escalation rate for the cost of projects. I don't have that number in my head, but it's greater than 4%. So each year that we push projects out that are ready to go or that could be funded now, you're looking at an increase of up to 4% a year in inflation costs. And that's based on what we've seen over the last 20 years of inflation for transportation projects.
But does that also include the deterioration of that substrate or anything like that? Like what I've heard demonstrated was for every dollar we don't spend, it's going to cost us $9 over a period of time.
Okay, so in this case, we're talking about two different things. So when you can get to a road, and this is starting to stray outside of budget world and into engineering stuff, and I don't want to step on engineers' territory.
No, but it does impact the budget.
Oh, it certainly does. No, I understand that. With regards to maintenance, when you can hit a project when it's still at a state where it can be kept up, excuse me, you can prolong the life of that road for a while. Eventually, it will slip beyond the help of maintenance and into what we call rehabilitation. So while it's true to say that if you spend a dollar here, you save money down the road, eventually that road will slip beyond the help of maintenance. So when we look at our $57 billion need, that is a need of all the projects that are already beyond the help of maintenance. Spending more maintenance won't take those projects and make them better. You need to invest in the rehabilitation as well. So certainly the longer we delay fixes, the SHOP shortfall, $57 billion, will increase. I don't know exactly what those numbers are. We will be talking about the SHOP later on. And the next 10-year SHOP is due a year from now. We'll look at all of these impacts.
Commissioner Gilmetti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Stephen, since I've been on the commission, I've been a big critic of the underfunding of SHOP, and I'm pleased to see that the governor's package is trying to work to increase that. I'm also pleased that the transit and intercity rail program is getting funded. But what I'm disappointed in is there's nothing here for system capacity increases that I can see.
Oh, right. Okay. So this is an interesting piece of the governor's proposal, and this goes back to the fixing of the price-based excise tax. So the governor's proposal fixes the price-based excise tax by getting rid of the annual adjustment and puts it at 18 cents a year, which provides funding for the STIP at about the level we were at 2 years ago. In other words, it fixes this shortfall this sudden drop that we've had. It's not included in the governor's numbers for new funding because it's fixing a problem that should never have existed. So when we talk about the new funding for transportation, the $500 million that's generated because of that fix is not included in this. So you could almost say on top of the $3.6 billion a year in these programs that are listed here, we're also fixing the problem with the STIP funding.
And that money goes to the state.
Yeah, but is that going to be enough to increase the capacity of our roads as the population and job growth continues in the state of California? I mean, I can see it in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley. We've got tremendous job growth, and we've just got everything clogged. And we're trying to do everything we can with transit to keep up with it, but transit's not the only answer.
So I don't know that I have a really good answer for that. It's certainly the needs for expansion. I won't say they're infinite, but they're certainly almost undefinable. And I think the CTC, when you did the look at the needs for transportation funding in 2011, that number was rather large and very difficult to get around. Some of these other programs, such as the transit programs, will help alleviate the need for expansion of highway systems. But
only in a minor way. I mean, there's only, for example, the BART system is just bulging. You can't put more people on BART during the commute times. The Muni system in San Francisco is bulging. You can't put more people on it unless you do a subway system in San Francisco. So I don't think transit is the only answer. I think it's part of the answer, but if we don't combine the two together, roadway expansion and transit development, we're going to dig ourselves deeper and deeper into a hole.
I think it's fair to say we've got a capacity deficit of the entire transportation system, all modes, and by no means would that fix address the capacity expansion deficit that we have on all the modes.
No, I realize that. I said I'm happy about the SHOP program. I'm happy about the transit, but there's nothing here that's really, in my mind, addressing system expansion on the road system.
Well, it doesn't address the complete deficit, but don't underestimate the significance of the Board of Equalization fix, because that does fix a big problem that we have with the STIP. It doesn't solve the problem entirely, but it is a huge step forward.
I would add that all this really does is hold it steady. It will not grow over time.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's my point. Thank you. You said it a lot better than I did.
Thank you, Laurel. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Keck? All right. The fun never stops here. Thank you very much, Stephen, for this. I'm going to ask us if we'll just take a 10-minute comfort break, little stretch break, and we will reconvene here at 3:15.